Hello guys, it's Good Samaritan here. I want to go ahead and create our CCNA Lab number 2. So if you missed the first lab, it's definitely on YouTube. So what I want to do now is I want to put some IP addresses on our switch 1 and also switch 2. And also I want to define the IP addresses that are going to be on router 1, router 2, and router 3. And then we're going to bring up the interfaces. We're also going to configure speed and duplex. And let's get started. So I'm going to start with switch number 1. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to select the CLI tab. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. I'm going to type EN. Notice it's called switch 1 because we did name it in the first lab. So from here I'm going to type config space T. And we're going to type interface. We want to go to gigabit. We can just abbreviate this, 01, enter. And then from there, I want to go ahead and say speed 1000 for gigabit. We're going to hard code it just so you know the commands. And let's set it up for duplex full, which means we can send and receive at the same time. And then from there, I'm going to type interface VLAN 1. We're going to start off with using VLAN 1. Later we'll pick a different VLAN, but just to get going here, enter. And we're going to say IP address. And you can abbreviate. You don't have to type out the full command, so I usually just type IP space add. And then from there we're going to put in 192.168.1.2 space 255.255.255.0. Enter. Now your VLAN 1 interface is shut down by default, so we want to bring that up by doing no shutdown. And we see some status messages. So it says syslog level 5. So the link is changed. Interface VLAN 1 change state to up. Line protocol on interface VLAN 1 change state to up. So layer 1 and layer 2 are making an attempt to come up. Now notice that the triangles are still red. We still got to configure the router side, and then those will attempt to fully come up. But the virtual interface right now at least is up. Now we also want to give our switch a default gateway. So we're going to type in IP default-gateway. And we want to point it to the interface on the router, the IP, which is, we're going to make that 192.168.1.1. So if we do connect to the switch, and then from the switch we want to leave our local network to go to a remote network, the switch itself would need a default gateway. And then we're going to go ahead and save that config. So do copy run start. That's copying the config that's in RAM, which is, we call that the running dash config, to startup dash config, which is our saved config that'll be in NVRAM, so non-volatile random access memory. So we're going to go ahead and press enter. Oh, I also want to put a description on the interface going over to the router. So I want to go back into that gigabit port and put description. I usually like to say LAN interface to router 1, and then we'll save that again. So do copy run start. The do command allows us to execute copy commands without having to go all the way back to privileged mode. So it's a nice little shortcut. I'm going to go ahead and press enter twice, and that will save that. And then we're going to head over to switch 2 on the far right and basically do the same type of thing. So again, I'm going to select the CLI tab, press enter. That's the command line interface tab. EN, config space T, interface gigabit 01. And then we're going to say speed 1000 duplex full, and description, LAN interface to router 3, and then exit, interface VLAN 1, enter, IP space address, and then 192.168. This is going to be 4.2, and I need to put the subnet mask, scooch this over a little bit. So 255.255.255.0, enter. Let's do our no shutdown. We can abbreviate by just typing no space shut. Exit, and then the router that we're going to point the switch to in this case is this interface on router 3, which is going to be the 192.168.4.1. So we're going to say IP default dash gateway, and then 192.168.4.1, enter, and then let's go ahead and save our config. So do copy run start. So again, that's going to copy the current config that's in RAM to NVRAM. So if we were to lose power or something like that, we would keep those configurations. So go ahead and minimize this one, and we're going to go to router 1 and select the CLI tab. We're going to configure this gigabit 00 port on the router, and also the serial 000 port. We got old school serial links that they also want you to be a little bit familiar with, older WAN connections. And we also are going to configure this software interface known as a loopback interface. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Type EN to go to privileged mode, which is an abbreviation for enable. And then we can do config T, which is an abbreviation for configure terminal, to go to our global config, and we'll see the config parentheses pound to let us know we're in the global config. We already have a host name on the router, so we just want to configure these interfaces. So I'm going to abbreviate interface gigabit 00, enter, IP space address, again I'm abbreviating, and then 192.168.1.1 space 255.255.255.0, enter, description, LAN interface to switch 1, enter, speed 1000, duplex full to match what we did on the switch. We're statically putting it, so we're not going to use the auto speed and auto duplex, which would probably work fine. I just wanted you to see the commands if we wanted to hard code it. And then again, a no shutdown. Now what we should see is the interface just to the left of router 1 going green. And eventually the one on the switch that's amber will go green. That's because there's something on the switch called spanning tree protocol, which that'll be in a later lab. But that should take up to 50 seconds or so to go green. So it will come up, and then we're going to configure the serial port. So interface S0/0/0, enter. And again, IP add. Now this one I want to be a 193 address. So 193.168.2.1. And then 255, 255, 255. Now /30 is going to be a 252 at the end. So I want to make sure that we put that in there. So we are going to support VLSM. We have different size subnet masks. A /24 to the left of router 1, a /30 to the right, because we only need 2 IPs. And that's what that /30 will give us. Let me go ahead and press enter. Description, this is going to be a WAN interface to router 2. Enter. And then we want to also put a bandwidth. The default is T1. They do want you to know how to make it look like it's a little bit slower or faster. So we're going to do bandwidth 64. Now, just so you know, the bandwidth when we put the numbers in kilobits. So we're going to say 64. Enter. That's what I want to set it to. And then no shutdown. Now the problem with this one is what we're using between these routers are called a back-to-back serial cable. It allows us to test, serial connections without having to have a live circuit when we're in a lab environment. So we did this side, and it won't come up until we do the other side on router 2. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save the config, except we've got to do the loopback. So we're going to type interface LO0, which is an abbreviation for loopback 0. This is a software interface that'll always be up as long as the router has power. And it's good to use this for management if I want to SSH to it or Telnet or something like that, or ping it. So I have one IP to remember for all the physical IPs. They'll have this one virtual or loopback IP that we can use for testing. So I'm going to press enter. Notice the interface came up. I haven't even given it an IP address yet. Now I'm going to go ahead and do IP address 1.1.1.1, and then we're going to use what's called a host mask, which is all ones, 255, 255, 255, 255. Now I wouldn't use this in the real world because somebody does own that address, but in a lab environment that's not connected to the real world, it's just easy to remember that router 1, when we want to get to that, it's going to be 1.1.1.1, and router 2 will be 2.2.2.2, and router 3 will be 3.3.3.3. So it's one IP to remember to get to each of the routers. Makes it very nice when we're doing troubleshooting and stuff like that. From there, I'm going to press enter. And I don't have to do a no shutdown because that interface is already up, but I do want to go ahead and save the config. So I'm going to do copy run start. Let's head over to router 2. And on this one, we're just going to use the 2 serial ports. So on the left, it's S000, and on the right, it's S001. So I got to configure those 2 interfaces plus the loopback. So I'm going to scooch this over so I can see everything. I like to view what I'm configuring. That's why I moved the screen over. So again, I'm going to type EN to go to privileged mode, config T to go to our global config, interface S000, enter, and then basically the same thing that we did. IP add 193.168.2.2 space 255, 255, 255, 252, enter, description, WAN, interface to router 1. Let's do a bandwidth, again, 64, and a no shutdown. And now notice the triangles that were facing in the downward direction were red, and now they're green, which is a good thing. And let's go to the other serial port. So int S001 and IP add, and this one's going to be 193.168.3.1, 255, 255, 255, 252 again, and then description WAN interface to router 3, bandwidth 64, no shut. Now that one's not going to come up until we do the interface on router 3 that's going towards router 2. Enter. And then we'll do our loop back. So LO0. Give it the IP. So 2.2.2.2, all 255s. And let's save our config. We'll minimize that, go over to our last router here, router 3. Select the CLI tab, press enter. Let me expand this a little bit. Now this one doesn't have a unique host name, so I'm going to go ahead and configure that one while I'm here. So config space T, host name router 3, enter, int S000, IP add 193.168.3.2, 255.255.255.252, description WAN interface to router 2, bandwidth again 64, and we're going to do a no shut. Now notice the interfaces are coming online, and then we're going to do a int gig 00 and IP add 192.168.4.1. This one's going to have a 24-bit, so 255.255.255.0. Enter. Description LAN interface to switch 2. Let's go ahead and put the speed of 1000. Duplex full to match the other side. And then no shut. Okay. Then we're going to do the loop back. So int LO0. And we're going to type IP add 3.3.3.3, 255, 255, 255, 255, enter, and then a do copy run start. All right, let's go to switch 2. And on this one, I think we show run, see what we got. Okay, just want to make sure that show run is going to show you your current config that's in RAM. Just want to make sure we've got the VLAN 1 and the default gateway. And we also, again, put the description so we can see that right here. And duplex full and speed 1000. Now there is one other thing that we need to do. If you notice that the interface here, serial 000, has this little clock symbol there, and the same thing here, serial 000 has this clock symbol. And notice that router 2 has that, but the interface on router 1 does not, and the interface on router 3 does not. So when you connect the cable, that red cable that we connected in the first lab, the one that you click on first is called the DCE side, and the one that you drop it on is the DTE side. So data communication equipment versus data terminal equipment. Data communication equipment versus data terminal equipment. I'm going to go ahead and label this. So this is going to be the DTE side, just so we know, and this is on that how that cable is wired. And I'll go ahead and, oops, the wrong button there. This is going to be the DCE side. Copy and paste that over here. And that's the one that has that little clock by it. And then I'll change this to DTE. And I'm going to move this over to that side. Now, the side that's the DCE side, we have to add an extra command under these interfaces known as a clock rate. So let me go back to router 2 to add that. So I'm going to type int S000 and clock space rate. And just so you could see that when you're doing the clock rate, it's in bits per second. So we did a 64K with the bandwidth. So to match that, we want to do 64,000 for the clock rate. And let's go to the other interface and apply the same command. Okay. And we'll go ahead and save that. Now, if I want to see that that's the case, if I didn't know what these clock symbols, there's a command that we can use. It's do to run it in an interface mode, show controllers, and then we can put S for the serial port, and then the 0/0/0. When I press enter, you're going to get like a whole page of stuff. Right, here's where I did the command, and right at the top, it'll tell us right here that it's the the DCE side, and then we've got the clock configured. Okay, so on that interface, it's the DCE, and if I go to the other side, and that's the interface here that points over here, so this one should be the DTE. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and do a do show controllers again, and then put S0/0/0, and then if we look at the top of that output, you'll see it's the DTE side. And it is working because we can see the transmit and receive clocks are detected. So I can go ahead and close this, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. Now we've got our IP addresses. We've got on the switches, the default gateway pointing it to the router. We also configured the loopbacks. So the next lab is going to be, we're going to do some static and static default routing. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and catch the next one.